All right, welcome back to yet another episode of Fresh Juice, an indie game podcast where we talk about all the indie game hotness going on in the world and review games as well. And today we have an interesting one to talk about. I am one of your hosts, Tommy Fresh, and joined as always is
Maddie Juice. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Fresh Juice podcast. It's great to have you, and we're excited to talk about some indie games, some indie news, and a lot of cool stuff. Listener questions as well. So if you do have a listener question, we'll just say it at the top of the show. Join the Discord, all right? Join our Discord. Link is in the description. Wherever you're watching, listening, join, submit some listener questions, and we'll answer them live on the show. So, yeah.
live for us. Live for us.
Live for us.
Not for you, but, you know, you can pretend like you're listening. I mean, as far as you know,
True.
This could be at any time. We could have recorded this 2 seconds ago, and you're just getting it in a slight delay, which is probably not how it works. But we do have a good episode. Yes, join the Discord. Check out all of our socials as well. Fresh Juice Pod. It's the best way to keep up with what we're doing. But we have an interesting game this week called RIN: The Last Child. It's a metroidvania. We're going to talk about it a little bit after we get to some news. But before we do the news, what is new with you, Matthew?
Well, let's see here. Man, work's been crazy lately. Last week was just like so much going on, and Monday, today, the day we're recording here, it's just continuing. You know, it's just been like nonstop. It's always the worst when like people message you, like 3 people message you at one time, and you're like, oh my god, like I'm just gonna lose my mind. And that keeps happening. But other than that, I mean, outside of work, it's been fun. It's been solid, you know, having a good time. What did I even do over this weekend? God, I don't even know if I remember. But it was a good weekend. I don't fully remember what I did, but yeah, it was a good one though. What about you, Tom? How's everything going?
Nice. I'm feeling the same thing with work as well. It's just a busy time, and God, I feel like I'm the only one that cares right now, and I'm pulling my hair out, but you know, whatever hair I have left, and I'm just losing it. But I'm happy. This is actually the best thing. It's like I'm happy when I'm podcasting, and this is what we're doing. So like, you know, I'm feeling a lot better after today's shenanigans. But over the weekend, had some friends over. We watched the football games. They weren't great, to be honest, but the company was good. I will say that. And then on Saturday, it was the pre-release weekend for a new Flesh and Blood set. So I went to a local game store in Somerset, New Jersey called The Gilded Raven. Definitely check it out if you like trading card games, board games, anything like that. They have a great selection there. They're good people. And I played.
Name too.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, super awesome. They got a cool logo, little gold raven thing. Nice. That they just started making like swag too. I think is pretty cool. But it was a good time. I played Flesh and Blood like all day. I was there from like noon till like 8 o'clock. So it was a long day of Flesh and Blood. And I got another long weekend of Flesh and Blood coming up. I'm going to Hartford, Connecticut, and doing a big tournament up there. Hopefully, you know, win some for the juice heads out there as well as the buds. But you know, it's the end of January, you know, and sometimes the end of January just sucks. So it's a good time to play some indie games, I think, and that's what we've been doing. So let's talk about some news. What do you have for us here?
Yeah, I threw in a few articles here. First off is actually something I noticed on Steam today. It is called Games in Sweden 2024. So this is actually, it says it's hosted by Fireshine Games and Raw Fury Games. Both are publishers in the indie space. And they are featuring a bunch of deals on Steam right now for a ton of different indie games. We actually posted about one of them in our Discord. We posted about game deals in there for Core Keeper, which is a game that is currently in early access, but I've been hearing a lot about kind of for a while. So I might might pick it up, but there's a bunch of games in here. I'm just looking at like My Friend Pedro. You got The Hunter, V Rising, which is like I know it was a really popular game. RoboQuest. There's a ton of games in here and a ton of demos as well. So I figured it was just worth shouting out on the show. Definitely go check out Games in Sweden. I think it started today and it might last about a week. I'm not really sure. It doesn't say on here how long it's going to be lasting. But yeah, check it out. Supporting the Swedish developers and publishers out there. Always something really cool to do. So it wasn't really something I saw like super promoted on Steam. I actually was looking at a specific game on Steam and it was kind of just like in the sidebar. So I didn't really see it on like the front page. I might have missed it. So definitely I think if you just Google games in Sweden, you'll find the Steam link for that. We'll also probably put it in the show notes if we remember as well. But yeah, so pretty cool.
Yeah, it looks pretty awesome. I mean, there are some bangers on here. You mentioned V Rising. I played a little bit of that. That was awesome. I want to play more of it, to be honest, if I ever get some time. The Ascent, I've heard good things about. And then Kingdom Two Crowns, I hear stuff about that game all the time. It's one that I probably should have played. It seems like right up my alley. But they do have a tab here for upcoming games, which is kind of cool. And I'm looking at this one I've never heard of called Sulfur. It's a FPS procedural roguelite. Seems pretty neat. I love the art style here. It's almost, God, I don't even know how you describe it. It's cartoony, but not like.
Yeah, there's no shadows. It looks like it's just like straight up the colors. Like there's no depth to the color. I guess it's like as if Microsoft Paint maybe.
Yeah,
I'm trying to think of another game that's like similar to that. But yeah, I'm looking at the little preview here. That does look pretty cool. We'll have to check out some of these upcoming games and maybe review them on the show.
Yeah, that would be actually that's a great tool for us. It looks like it has this game. I mean, just looking at the page here, it has like a really neat inventory system and stuff like that. Kind of reminds me of Dredge in a way. Their inventory system, which is kind of neat. I like to see a little bit of that at Reach other games. So yeah, I think that's worth checking out. I'm glad you threw that in there. But I also saw that something's happening with this Crab Souls like.
Yeah, so this is something I saw over the weekend. So there's a game coming out called Another Crab's Treasure. It's being developed by a small team at Aggro Crab Games, is the name of their studio. And it's something I've been looking forward to for it's probably like a year or two, because it is a Souls-like. I'm into the Souls games, and it's basically the entire premise of the game is that you're a hermit crab that has lost his shell, and so you're going on this adventure to try to find your shell again. So you pick up other things like a mug or an empty can, and you use that as your shell temporarily. Gives you different stats and all that. So that's kind of the rundown of the game. But yeah, their studio, Aggro Crab Studio in Seattle, has been broken into for a third time, and two of those times were in the same week. Apparently, all that was stolen were Xbox controllers and SSDs. Hopefully, none of those SSDs had a bunch of game code on there, but I'm sure with this being the third time, I'm sure they're uploading all of their stuff to the cloud because it's just like, what is going on here, But, is this an inside job? Who knows? I'm not saying it is, but I mean, it is in the news. So I don't know, but it's just wild. Like if you're out there and you're listening and you're thinking about breaking into a game studio, just don't do it. Okay. Just don't do it. Just wait until the game is out and then you'll get to play it. Okay. Because every time you do this, it delays the game, I would imagine, especially if you're stealing stuff. It's like, come on, what are you doing? So, yeah, just wild that this is happening. One time is like, all right, that happens. 3 times is like something is going on.
Is there like a rival like Crab Souls like in development that they're trying to like race them? It's like, well, if we take away their controllers, they can't test the game, like or something like that. I don't know. This is pretty crazy. It does feel like an inside job. I mean, we can't really say for sure.
Yeah,
because we don't know. We don't want to, speculate and say that somebody working there is doing this. But come on, I mean, it doesn't seem great. What's going on? But the game does look sweet. I think that I love that concept, right? The hermit crab concept, and Yeah, well, hopefully no more break-ins. I just saw there's a tweet here that the Astroneer devs swung by and gave them security cams and loaner dev hardware, which is I mean, pretty awesome. You know, kind of the community wins here. Rising tide raises all ships and all that fun stuff. So crazy. Like, I mean, that's like a crazy story.
Yeah, definitely. And also, shout out to Astroneer. That game is awesome. If you guys haven't played that game, it's pretty much on everything now, I think, and it might even be on Game Pass. But really cool, just kind of minimalistic, kind of space, almost like a survival exploration sort of game. A lot of fun, really chill game. Great game for just kind of killing some time. But yeah, you know, it's wild. And honestly, like just talking about like another Crab's Treasure, it's also almost like refreshing, right? To get like a Souls like that isn't like gothic and like dark, you know, like getting something that's a little bit more lighthearted, which is probably why I'm so excited for it as well, just to kind of see, you know, how that ends up being. But yeah, I mean, you know, hopefully this is the last time. Hopefully we're not covering this next week for a fourth or a fifth break in. You know, hopefully number 3 is the end of it. But yeah, set up those security cameras, Aggro Crab Games, because clearly you are a target in someone's eyes. But
I mean, yeah, it's funny. We don't want any more repetitive indie game stories. Like, you know, obviously, like the AI art thing had been pretty repetitive. We could technically talk about more layoffs that have happened over the week, but I don't think that's worth mentioning because it's really sad. But like,
yeah,
let's not make break-ins part of the repetitive news cycle for indie games. Like,
right? Yeah,
that'd be crazy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, but I also did throw another article in here, and this is actually something that I never heard of before somehow, but it's called Day of the Devs, and it's going on their 12th year. It's an indie game showcase, and they have announced for this year they are, or I guess going forward, they are now going nonprofit. So they are asking anyone that wants to support them to help raise funds, you know, to help kind of spotlight those, as they put it, unique and magical video games and the developers who make them. So this is actually an in-person event that takes place in, I believe, San Francisco in California. And the event is completely free as well, which it always has been apparently for the first, you know, 11 years it's been around, which is just really awesome to see that, like, you know, it's kind of, I feel like this event is really capturing like the indie spirit in a way. And unfortunately, you know, we're on the East Coast, so it's a little hard for us to get out there. But I would love to go to a Day of the Devs event if there was ever one on the East Coast, especially now seeing that they kind of need more support than ever. It's also ran by Double Fine Games, who and a bunch of other studios as well. But Double Fine's probably the most well known. They've made Psychonauts. I know is like the game for me that I always think of when I think of Double Fine, but. Yeah, just a really cool event. And if you are in the San Francisco area, you know, definitely go check it out. I believe it is going to be happening on March 17th. So St. Patrick's Day. Go out, get some drinks, head to the, maybe not in that order, maybe go to the Day of the Devs, and then go get some drinks. And then, you know, yeah, check it out. But it just seemed like a cool event. So I figured I'd throw it in here.
Yeah, I love to see stuff like that. Obviously, we talk about PAX East a lot, and our favorite part about it has become the indie devs. So to kind of see it, like, you know, more of that, right? I think those showcases are pretty important. Like the like AAA teams, like, yeah, they can show off games and stuff like that and have really awesome booths and stuff like that. But like, they also get good press on their games anyway. It's not like anybody's not in the know, like, that cares about video games when it comes to their games. Like, it just is a natural thing that happens. But for indies, it's great to be like hands-on, talk to devs. Devs can kind of create unique experiences, like we saw with Kung Fu Kickball when we first discovered that game, stuff like that. So yeah, really neat. Would love to get out there at some point, or even see some more stuff like that on the East Coast. Now,
yeah,
it's time to get down to brass tacks, Maddie. We got to talk about RIN, The Last Child. So the RIN is the main character, you know, the last child of the creator, who the creator is. We don't know in this game, but on a journey to restore order in a mystical world, collect aspects and runes, craft spells, and confront powerful bosses, your transformed siblings. The fate of the world rests in your hands. Can you restore harmony to this enchanted realm? This is a Metroidvania coming from Space Fox Games. We played it on Steam. The console launch has been delayed, and it is about $20. We got it on sale for $16 or $15.99, and that is until February 1st, which will give you a day if you're listening to this, the day of this podcast coming out. So let's talk about the gameplay. Matthew, do you want to start here?
Yeah, sure. So when you first start up the game, there is a little cutscene, kind of gives you basically what you just said, Tommy. Kind of describes the setting and everything, and then it just kind of drops you into the game. There is like a very light tutorial, which I thought was fine. There's not a lot that you're essentially doing in this game. So essentially, the way that the kind of the mechanics work is that you have 3 slots for different abilities, essentially. One of them that I had is like kind of like a slash ability. Then you have another one that's kind of a missile sort of ability. And then I had another one, I think that was like healing as well. So there's kind of different abilities for, different purposes, and you can kind of swap those in and out in those kind of 3 slots. And then you're really just kind of running and jumping, and it's a Metroidvania. You're a platformer. You're just kind of running around. There is a map, which is nice. I did enjoy having a map in the game, although I did find it a little bit confusing. And I got to just say, like, just out of the gate, I wasn't like fully blown away by the gameplay. To me, it felt unpolished in a way, if that makes sense. And I don't know, we'll talk about the art. I don't know if that has more to do with like the way the art is in the game. But there were just a lot of things in the gameplay that I almost felt like I was exploiting the gameplay by doing it. I didn't know if the game wanted me to do it or if I was just kind of breaking the game slightly. There are particular things I can point out, like trying to jump from underneath a platform. I think we've all kind of maybe done that in games, especially like platformers where you're underneath a platform and maybe you can jump up and kind of through it. Depending on what game it is, sometimes they allow you to do that. When I would try to do it, which I don't think the game wants me to do it, but my character would kind of like shake underneath like the platform and then kind of drop down. I was like, all right, I guess I'm not supposed to do that. But just like kind of little things like that where it didn't really seem like the polish was there. There's also, like Tom said, you're kind of going through the game and all the bosses are your siblings. So I know like the first boss I came across was this giant lava worm boss. And they're essentially, when you enter the area, there's kind of these little fire things that shoot up that just let you know this is the boss arena. You can't leave this area. And I figured out that if I just stand next to one of them, the boss can't hit me at all. I figured that out pretty quickly, just because the boss's mechanics and attacks were not overly complicated. It's kind of the same attack over and over. So that boss was pretty easy to defeat. And it's like little things like that like I understand, it's probably maybe it's a little bit on me, right? Of like figuring out stuff like that and taking advantage of it. But also at the same time, I feel like the game design shouldn't allow you to do that, right? Like just expand where the boss can attack, things like that. So those are just a few examples of kind of just some stuff I wasn't like super crazy about with the feel of the gameplay. I was just like, okay, I kind of felt like after every level, I was kind of looking for like, what is that? How can I cheese these enemies? Can I just stand up on top and kind of cheese the enemies a bit? And not really have to deal with them. And also, it was at least in that first area, there's not a lot of enemy variety for me. You're kind of just running across, I think, like 3 different types of enemies pretty much in that first entire level. And the level's pretty large. That first like kind of world I was in, I kept going like deeper and deeper into the game, into the down into the depths. And I was like, wow, this is pretty expansive, but it never really felt I was getting a lot of variety while I was going down there. It just kind of felt like I was just kind of looking to see where I haven't been before. And I also wasn't sure if the game even wanted me to be there. So it didn't, I know I'm kind of throwing a lot out there, but it just overall, it just kind of seemed like the game wasn't fully polished in the sense of, the movement and just like the, I guess, like enemy collisions and enemy kind of their patterns, but also in the sense of like, uh, direction. Like I didn't know where I should really be going. And I know like, a lot of Metroidvanias, you want to explore. I just didn't feel like I wanted to explore more after a certain point. I was like, all right, I've seen enough of this. But one thing I will say, kind of wrapping this up with the gameplay side of things for me, one thing that I did think was cool, and it just has to do with a mechanic in the game, is you can upgrade your spells. You can kind of enchant your spells in different ways. So there's like runes that you find that you can basically, if you want to, you can tweak your spells in whatever play style fits you best. So for one of my spells, like I increase damage, but at the same time, I also increase the mana cost for that spell. So, that might not fit your play style if you like to spam things a lot or whatever it is, you want to kind of conserve your mana. But I thought that was a really cool kind of mechanic and feature of the game is that you can upgrade and enchant spells. And unfortunately for me, that was the coolest part of the gameplay. I just kind of felt, that unlocking runes and upgrading my spells got me excited, but then going and actually using them didn't really get me like super excited. So that was my overall experience with RIN, at least the gameplay side of it. Tommy, how are you feeling about it?
Well, I'll start with the good, right? You know,
Yeah.
and I agree with you. I thought that a lot of the rune and spell kind of crafting was the coolest part here. It was a unique take on kind of like the Metroidvania upgrading kind of thing, right? But it kind of stopped there. I mean, I did it a couple, like I did a decent amount of times throughout playing, and it felt like getting the runes and spells, or like I forget what they call them, but like just the essence and stuff like that.
Aspect.
The
Yeah,
aspects.
aspects. Yeah.
Yeah. Like that was not fun. Like I liked once I got it that I can kind of play around in the menu and like mess around and see what I can do with these spells and just see what they do. But it just didn't really do anything beyond that for me. So I love Metroidvanias. I think it's probably one of the top, outside of like your traditional, I guess, roguelites, I guess, but like is one of the top genres of games I play in the indie sphere. And I gotta say, like this one just was like so directionless, like in terms of the gameplay. I felt like I was just hopping around. You mentioned it. The same enemies, like the enemies were not anything special. They were not. There was no variety. Sure, it was like each enemy was like a evolution of the last one, and it kind of had maybe it was more powerful or attacked in a different axis, but like that was not good enough, right? Like you got to give the player like variety, and like I think that they just kind of missed the mark there. And the map, every Metrovania should have a map that you want to explore and stuff like that. But there was no sense of progression. It didn't feel like until you just like randomly ran into stuff, right? Like that shouldn't be how it is. Like the boss fight, you should be like, oh, I'm about to get to a boss fight, right? I don't think it should be where all of a sudden it becomes a boss fight and like, things go up. To me, that's like a mini boss on your way to the final boss. Like, I'm trying to think of a game that I think it was called Slay. It was like a heavy metal Metroidvania platformer. That might not have been it, but it was a pretty cool game. And they had similar things where you would get to a certain point and like walls would go up, but that was just a mini boss, and it was on your way to the main boss. So I just felt like I was just hopping around, and it didn't feel like that it took skill to kill these enemies. You just had to figure out how to spam them the best, I felt like, and to try to make sure you didn't run out of juice or whatever, mana. But it just, I don't know. This game, it was very frustrating to me because it to me when I'm jumping around and you're gonna hear me mention this a couple times. It felt like I was playing like a Flash game from like Newgrounds like 20 years ago, just like hopping around this platformer and just sure if I wanted to kill some time, maybe I would play this and it was free. But like when I'm like spending money and hoping for a really unique Metroidvania experience, I didn't get that. And there are other factors here that are going to play into why the gameplay was a failure as well. And we'll get to that with the visuals and I think the story and the music as well. The music
Yeah.
not so much. Music was fine, but we'll talk about that. But yeah,
Yeah,
I just felt like the gameplay really fell short, and it was just it's like they didn't understand what a Metroidvania was, in my opinion.
yeah, no, I agree. It almost felt like a Metroidvania like light or like it was like on its way. Like it was like a I almost felt like it was like a school project too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
someone that, just kind of built it in their spare time, which could have been the case. But I think you brought up a great point too of just, with like the aspects and like these runes that you find throughout the world, they're just you just kind of stumble upon them. And even after beating like the first boss, for example, like there's something in the game called a spell pattern, I believe, which essentially like unlocks a stronger version of the spell, I believe. I'm trying to look through my notes here, but anyway, it was like an important thing to get, and you got that after beating the first boss. But it wasn't like there was like a special moment that happened or anything. You just kind of walked past where you beat the boss, and it was just there, and you just kind of picked it up, and you're like, all right, I got it. Like I just feel like there should be a special moment of like I beat this boss and then I got this. I kind of had to put together like, oh, I got this because I got past the boss there. It wasn't really like the game felt like it was rewarding me for beating the boss, if that makes sense. So yeah, I do think that enchanting and all the spells and stuff like that, upgrading the spells was a cool idea, but it just didn't feel like super rewarding to even find them in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Which I honestly think if they made that really rewarding, it might have helped the gameplay as a whole, because it would have propelled you to want to keep exploring, even if the enemies were like similar, or if the kind of floaty jumping. I kind of felt like the jumping wasn't like fully great. Like it kind of would have made up, I think, for a lot of that if it felt a little bit rewarding, like building out your spells. But it just kind of felt like you just stumbled upon them. So I thought that was a great point that you brought up about that. But I know we got to dig into the story as well. So what were your thoughts there?
I felt like there was no story. I mean, you mentioned it when you talked about the beginning of the game. You get a cutscene, kind of explains what the deal is here. Like you're the last child of the creator, and you got to find your siblings. But like that's it, right? There was no direction in the gameplay, and there was no direction in the story. It felt like whatever. Like it didn't feel like it mattered that you were looking for the siblings, right? And yeah, like there's enemies and stuff like that, and I understand you want to like save this enchanted realm or whatever, but like whatever, you can have enemies in like worlds, right? Like I think that's just like a thing that you could have. It needs to feel like this world is really like gone to shit, and I felt like that was not the case. And you're just running around and whatever. I don't know. Like the story was just nowhere to be found to me. And like, sure, you would get to a point where I guess a plot point would happen, but it wouldn't feel like it mattered at all. And I didn't feel like I was tied to the main character. The main character was pretty emotionless and didn't feel like had much of a personality to make me want to even play as this character. I think that's a huge part of a story. You want to actually relate or at least find the main character interesting. And the only interesting thing about the main character was the way she looked, I think, and that it kind of ended there. So like the story was a big miss for me. It just felt like to me, and this happens a lot. This happened with a lot of the games that we don't particularly enjoy, is that there were a lot of ideas, right? And it gets to a point where you spread yourself so thin on your ideas and you don't know when to say no to ideas. And all of a sudden, what may have been a really good idea at the core, like let's say the original idea was, I want a Metroidvania where you find spells or things that activate spells and you get to upgrade them, and that's how you beat the game. Awesome idea. I think that is the best thing coming out of this game. And I would love to see it used perhaps in a sequel. I don't think there will be one, but perhaps in another game. But once you start thinking, it was like, well, I got to think about the story. Well, what if this was it and that was that? And then all of a sudden, you get to a point where it's just a ton of ideas with no cohesiveness, and it makes for a poor story and poor game, in my opinion. And I think that, I talk about this like in my other podcasts a lot too. What makes games like Flesh and Blood and even Magic the Gathering so great is they use this thing called top-down design, right? They say, we want to make a set about, like most recently Flesh and Blood, we want to make a set about a deathmatch arena. That's what they say first. And they're like, okay, what would happen in that? Let's build a story around that. Okay. They built the story around the deathmatch arena, and once they had the story, they're like, okay, now we have the characters and the ideas here. We have to figure out how that would make sense like mechanically in our game. It was like, well, this one's called this one's called I don't know. It's a deathmatch arena. So like there's betting. So they're like, we have to have a mechanic called wager. So they made a mechanic called wager. If you win this attack, you win something. If you don't, your opponent wins something. That makes sense. It was like they started here and they got down to the gameplay. This feels like they started with the gameplay and then tried to build up from there. And I think that's where it's really suffering.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and it's all about like, making sure everything is kind of related to each other and works together in harmony. So yeah, there were definitely pieces of this game, in the story included, where when I first heard the story, uh, you know, I was like, oh, this is, they're talking about like siblings, right? Like, so this is going to be like the story is going to drive this game. That's what I was kind of thinking at first. I mean, it's called Rin the Last Child as well. Just from a title standpoint, that makes me go, oh, like what story wise is going to happen in this game? Who's Rin? What is Rin? And the Last Child, like I kind of just thought it'd be a little bit more fleshed out, especially with the fact that like your siblings are the bosses in the game. I didn't really pick up on that right away, even though they kind of mentioned it. Because after I beat the first boss, I then realized I was like, oh, that was one of my siblings. Because the boss, it's not like after you defeat the boss, it kind of like shrinks back down to your sibling or anything like that. Not that I noticed, at least. And it's not like the boss has any dialogue or anything that's indicating that it is your sibling. I just kind of felt like maybe when you first entered that kind of boss area, that typically, right, like with a boss fight, you enter a boss area and then maybe there's some words that are exchanged, like the boss says, stay out of here, sister, or like what maybe not sister, but whatever whatever Rin is, I don't know, but it just kind of, those little things I think could have tied it in a lot better. And then also just the fact that like this map, right, is so asymmetrical, right? Like you're going all over the place and you're finding, like I found like some hidden rooms and things like that. Not once did I stumble upon a piece of lore or even like an NPC that just kind of like maybe a shop or like something like that. Just something to come across, or just like someone that was like dying and I had to like, I just got their last few words, something, like we were just talking about the cub, right, with our last episode, and that did a fantastic job of intertwining the story into the gameplay. Even if the cutscenes weren't in there for that game, I still think the story would have been like decently strong. So I think like even just little things like that, and I'm not a game developer, but just if you just had an item that you can interact with and it opens up and there's a little bit of text in there, just providing a little bit of context, I think that would have went a long way in a game like this, especially one that's supposed to be so tied to like family and your siblings. It just it did fall short for me as well. And I agree. That top down approach is probably the way to go, especially when you're an indie dev and maybe you're a solo dev or you just have a really small team. So it could be hard to kind of narrow down your focus when you don't have the right people kind of around you that are able to filter through a lot of things. Especially if you're solo, you're just kind of thinking of everything, right? It might be hard to kind of narrow your focus down there. So, but unfortunately, the story did fall flat for me as well.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, but there are some positives in the next thing we're going to talk about, which is the visuals. I will say I'm not in love with all of it. I don't love a lot of the character movement. It kind of felt a little bit close to that game Hand in Hand that we played, kind of that clunky flash game esque movement, which I'm not a huge fan of, and I didn't love all of the environment stuff, and I definitely did not love the enemies. I want to ask you something. The first enemy, we see some kind of slug, right?
Yeah.
What did that slug look like to you?
What did it look like to me? I don't know,
Okay.
Magmar? No, I don't know.
I was just gonna say
Slugma?
it looked like Deadpool slug. It had like a Deadpool face. It felt like, and they kept
Oh,
putting that in all the different enemies in there. I just felt like it looked like Deadpool. And that's not really a knock against the design of those enemies, but the enemies were very homogenous, I guess is a good word to use. That
yeah.
they didn't feel super different. I mentioned that in the gameplay, but the things that they do well here, they kind of try to nail this this almost like Nordic tribal vibe, and I think they do nail that, especially with a lot of the runes and the different kinds of things like that. And it kind of ties into the music as well. We'll talk about that, but overall, they put a lot of effort into the art. That is for sure. Like the character herself looked really cool. Like I said that. Like I thought that she looked awesome. Wasn't in love with the movement, but as a character, that was unique. Kind of if you don't play Ori. But that
Yeah.
is what it is. But other than that, like it was totally fine. I think like had the story and or gameplay held the game up a little bit more, I would have forgiven some of the shortcomings of the art and the visuals. So it's tough to say. There's some things I liked about it. I liked that they kind of nailed that vibe of like Nordic tribalism, and then but they kind of fell flat with movement and just I think overall environment. It just didn't. Sometimes it was confusing. Well, what did this do? And then the other character design sucked, but she looked good. I don't know. That's where I kind of fell on the visuals.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of your points there. I think the game was very vibrant with its environments and even with the main character. She's got this kind of glow effect similar to Ori, as you mentioned. And yeah, okay, let's just talk about level design, like the way the level looks. I thought it was fine. The whole environment. There was like a decent amount of depth with like the way the background is and the foreground with the enemies. The enemies kind of have like this. At least the bosses, I really noticed it, like almost like a paper kind of like style to them, where they don't really have a lot of depth. They just kind of seem very 2D, two dimensional. I don't know why I had to define what 2D meant, but um,
Well, now we
yeah,
know.
but yeah, now you know. Yeah, 3D guess what? Three dimensional. 4D 40. No, but yeah. So the visuals overall, like I thought they were probably the strongest part to me about the game. Even just looking at the menus, like you mentioned, like kind of the Nordic vibe, like all the fonts, everything in the game is kind of this Nordic font, I guess. So that kind of ties everything in, which was cool to see. Even when you get a new rune and all that sort of stuff, it's all this kind of similar font. And even like when you're assigning runes, they kind of have this interesting like wheel system in a way of how you kind of upgrade your spells, which I thought was kind of cool and interesting. It's not just going into a menu and just like clicking, oh, I just want this one. It did there was a little bit of a learning curve with that, but just like from like an art standpoint, I thought it did look kind of cool. And yeah, just overall, the character design was fine. The enemy design, I didn't notice the Deadpool thing, but I'll have to go take a look again and see what you're talking about there, because I believe it. I believe it. But yeah, it just like the art was the strongest part, but it also wasn't a main reason to get the game. Like I hate bringing up Ori to compare with this game because I know a lot of people were bringing up Ori, but if you look at the way Ori is and you look at the way this game is, just from an art standpoint, the finesse and the polish that Ori has is really just on another level compared to this game. And it's hard to play this game and not think of Ori, especially when things kind of aren't exactly hitting. You're just like, oh man, like they were close, but they're not quite there, from the art department. So yeah, I enjoyed the art, but it definitely wasn't like strong enough for me to like to continue exploring in the game. Like for example, and that could be a driving factor in a lot of games, right? Is like, oh, like this game just looks so cool. I want to see what's next. Like even like a game like The Invincible. I know that's like we reviewed that weeks ago at this point. But just like the art and just the entire environment in that game, like I wanted to explore more in that game, like almost because of the art, because of the entire world. So yeah, just the art. It was fine, but I know we also need to talk about that sound, Tommy. So what do you think? You kind of alluded to before. What are you thinking of the sound in this game?
I think it was fine. The music definitely kind of with that like wind flute kind of thing definitely nailed home the tribal feel. It kind of felt very, like shamany in a way,
Yeah.
if that makes sense. And it kind of made sense with the vibe of the runes and the Nordic thing. That was fun. Actually, I was like, this is one of the higher points of the game. And the sound effects where it felt a little repetitive, I think, kind of there wasn't a lot of variety there, especially when you're hitting enemies and stuff like that. But that's like not really a nitpick, but like it's something that I can look past, especially if the overall music is sounding fine. So like I wasn't totally like impressed, but it was like, okay, they are actually understanding the assignment here, right? With what vibe they're going for, which I think is sometimes hard to do. So I have to give them, their flowers there for actually recognizing that. And, I don't know exactly who did the music here, if they went to an outside contractor or something like that and said, hey, this is what we want. Can you give us this? If they were, had the wherewithal to actually ask like the correct things when contracting this out, they nailed it. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it was fine. And, I liked it. It's not something I'll be listening to outside the game, but it was totally fine while I was playing.
Yeah, I agree. Fit the vibe of the game, and it's nothing to write home about. In terms of like sound effects, I did have one like issue. I think it was an issue where when you go fight that like lava worm, it's like the first boss. I'm pretty sure it was supposed to roar. Like when you first see him, it's not during the boss fight. It's kind of like a teaser, I think, up until the boss fight. He didn't make any sound for me. He just kind of like it looked like a big roar, and then he went underground and left. So I think there's just like little bugs here and there when it came to like the audio in the game, at least for the sound effects. I did find like the missile sound effects and just some of the attacks to be a little repetitive as well. And yeah, just the music was probably the highlight of the sound, but nothing more really to add to that. It was just kind of it is what it is sort of thing. But and then on the performance standpoint, everything ran fine for me, other than I guess that little audio bug that I had. Did everything? How was everything on your end?
It was actually, I mean, not the best, but
Okay.
there were a couple moments when like it would get laggy, and then I would get some weird sound stuff as well. It was, but I don't know. Like I think there's like this game felt like it was prematurely released, in a lot of ways. So I don't know. It felt a little weird, but that's where it was on the performance. Now it's time to give our ratings on this game.
Yes, it is.
We are certainly not high on this game. We don't know how low each of us are. Our ratings from the top to the bottom, some top-down rating design there. S tier is your certified fresh juice. A tier is a steal. B tier is get on sale. C tier is a manager's special. And then finally, D tier is spoiled milk. Matthew, what did you give this game?
All right, so I'm giving this game a manager's special. And the main reason for that is because I feel like if you can pick up this game for a few bucks, like I wouldn't pay more than like $4 maybe for the game, but it's still a Metroidvania. There's a decent amount of gameplay. I was reading a bunch of like reviews of the game just to kind of get the vibe of like what other people were saying, and there are a decent amount of people enjoying it. So I can't fully write it off personally, because I do think that if you're looking for a really really entry level Metroidvania, and you want to, if it's ever on sale, like a deep discount, I would say it's fine to pick up, but I also just wouldn't kind of expect a lot out of it, if that makes sense. It's just kind of almost like a time killer. I think you had mentioned that before. And also the big thing, the reason I'm giving it like a low score, there's just a lot of better Metroidvanias out there that are a similar price or cheaper. You got Ori, you got Hollow Knight. I mean, there's just like so many. You can just go down the list of, you just look at like game of the year winners, I'm sure over the last like 10 years, and there'll probably be like a little handful there that are Metroidvania or Metroidvania roguelite, and it's just it's unfortunate like there's so much competition for a game like this as well. So I just don't think it's worth picking up at full price or even just like a regular sale. I would say it would need to be on a deep discount, to even consider it. But that's what I'm giving it, Tommy. What about you?
Yeah, I was close to spoiled milk, I'll be honest, because as a Metroidvania fan, it kind of frustrated me. I'm like, God, this is just not it. This is not good. But I have to give it like a very low manager special, and that's the only reason why is the the spell crafting idea is good enough. I think that is such a like a bright star in this really like dark game. Like I think that if they could capitalize on that like going forward, or even like have some other games try to do something like that, we could have some kind of really deep experience in a Metroidvania or any other kind of like platformer, or even roguelite to a certain extent, that really gets to really explore that idea like fully. But unfortunately,
Yeah.
the rest of this game, and I mentioned they nailed some aesthetic vibes on the sound and visual side, but not nearly enough to prop this game up above a manager special. So I gotta give it a low manager special. Looking at Space Fox Games, like resume, this seems to be the biggest undertaking for them. It seems like a lot of puzzle games, mobile games in their past. So it
Mm.
this might be hopefully a step in the right direction for future games for them. Obviously, there is some good here, and they did a decent job with doing some of the stuff. We just need to kind of have a fully realized game to really even consider anything higher than a manager special. So, but yeah, that was Rin the Last Child. It was a humdinger, that's for sure. So I mean, I was fuming when I was playing that game. I'm not gonna lie, because I love Metroidvanias, Matt. Like
Yeah.
it's just I want a good experience when I play them, and I want people to make good ones. Like I want them to be. I want to
Yeah.
appreciate good ones. So We do have listener questions, which you can submit on the Fresh Juice Discord anytime, any day of the week. You don't have to wait till right at the last minute. You can just submit them. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
We'll read them. We'll read anything. No, maybe not anything. But the first one does come from our loyal juice head, Capolo. Imagine you start a new job as an indie game studio head. What would be the first game you are going to build?
Ooh, this is a really interesting one because neither of us really have any experience with game design, right? So if I'm gonna, let's just say everything goes perfectly with whatever idea that we come up with, there's no issues, funding, nothing like that. I've actually, it's weird. I've always been interested in like making a really good puzzle game, even at like a mobile puzzle game, just because like growing up, like you'd always find there's so much junk on like the App Store and the Play Store, but you always find like these little gems, right, of just like really great puzzle games. Like I know like I've played like threes before. I remember I used to play like a lot of threes. Not a super intense puzzle game, but I was always just like interested in how people came up with those ideas. So I know that's like probably a pretty small project in terms of like what an indie game studio could be doing. But I think it could be really interesting to like get a lot of perspectives from like the whole team. Like that's what I would do if I was like a studio head. Let me get everybody in the room, just throw out ideas, brainstorm ideas. We're not going to make everything. We got to make sure it makes sense and make sure it's cohesive. But I'm just really interested in like making a quality puzzle game that is just a real time killer, but it's always fun. So yeah, I don't know. That's probably the answer I'd go with. What about you, Tommy?
All right, so in this, I mean, I love the puzzle idea. That kind of crossed my mind at first because I was like, oh, that's somewhat conservative. You could really like kind of put your focus onto it, but I want to like I in this scenario, I'm in my head, I'm going, okay, why did they hire me? I have no experience. So they're desperate. So they're hiring me because they think I'm crazy enough to do something crazy, and I am. All right. So what I'm thinking is, and feel free to steal this idea, any devs out there listening. Two things that are really popular: roguelites, right? MMOs. Okay, how do you do that? That's the question I want to answer, right? I want a roguelite that is massive multiplayer online. Like a bunch of people just doing runs on the same level and like trying to like get to the end, and it's all procedurally generated. I think that would be so much fun. I would be thinking about, well, how do we get like really fun Twitch experiences for people streaming it? I want memes. I want this. This is me in the boardroom, just like,
Yeah.
I would actually, I want to be like the guy. If you ever seen the Key and Peele sketch where they talk about Gremlins 2, and he comes in.
I have it.
Oh, dude, I'll share it with you after this. It's honestly one of their best sketches where he's like, what kind of gremlin do you want to see in the movie? I was like, I don't know, like a nerdy one? You're going to get a nerdy one. And it's just like, just get every idea and like try to mush it together. But if not that, I would probably steal a Nintendo IP like Pokemon and try to make a Fortnite game out of it. But that's just
Call them pals.
Yeah, let's call them pals. Why not? Friends, buds.
Buds. Oh, there you go. Bud World.
Yeah. So that would be that's a great question. That would be my idea.
Yeah.
Now
I just thought that was hilarious too. Just like I was picturing you just like going in to like the board, like the room with like the team, they're all ready for like your big idea. And you're just like, I want a roguelike and an MMO. Put them together. go, and like no other details, just like figure it out.
I'm on lunch. See you later.
Yeah, I'm on lunch. Just like Steve Jobs, just like I think Bill Burr has like a joke. He's just like, I want 5,000 songs in my pocket. Figure it out. Just like what? What am I supposed to do? We don't have the technology.
Oh,
Jesus Christ.
Oh, that was a great question, Cap. Thank you for that
yeah.
one. And we have one other from rcarp11 who is, just upstairs from me right now. And she asks, what are your hidden talents?
Oh man, my hidden talents. Oh man, you take this one because I did have something, but I blanked out on it. But let the people know, what are your hidden talents?
Mine is I can burp on command. That's it. Whenever I want, I can burp. So if anybody wants me to burp, I won't do it into the mic right now. But just believe me, if you see me out in public, just say burp. I'll do it right in front of you. Don't worry. But for the audio listeners, I don't want to. I don't want to burp.
Well, we'll have to do it at some point, maybe live at PAX East. If you guys meet up with us, Tommy can do some burping for you. Let's see, hidden talents other than like kind of looking like Mr. Beast, which I hear all the time now, which I don't really, it's whatever. I don't know if I can still do this, but I used to be able to sound like Skeletor from He-Man. I doubt I can even do it now. I have to yell it, so maybe I spare the listeners as well, or I can just yell away from the microphone. But I used to, people in high school and in college, like when they found that out, they were like, "You have to do this all the time." So that's what I would do, and I would only say, I'd just say like, "You will never defeat me, He-Man," because I probably heard it in some episode of He-Man, and that's what he said. Also, Skeletor is just hilarious. If you watch that show, he is the comedic relief in that show. But yeah, He-Man. I can't really do it that well these days. But yeah, maybe that was a hidden talent at some point. I'm trying to think of what else. Rice with ketchup. I know rcarp11's gonna love to hear that. That's a hidden talent. But no, but yeah, I can't really think of anything else right now. But great question. Great question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for the questions, and yeah, no, I remember the He-Man voice for sure. But maybe once we open a Patreon, we'll do the burps and the He-Man voices.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But this leads us to the end of the show, which means we're gonna do Rec Room, where we recommend something that might not be an indie game. What do you have here? I see your note here. It says slow horses.
Yeah, no, I love when you're watching like the like a horse race, and like whoever's in last is just no, I'm just joking. That's not what this is. But I just realized it kind of looks like I just put in like I love when horses are slow. But no, it's a show on Apple TV. I feel like I always recommend Apple TV shows, but we are on Maria and I are on season 2. We just actually watched an episode right before recording. And the premise of the show, it stars Gary Oldman, who's great, is that it takes place in England, and they are essentially part of MI5. So, like the, CIA or whatever, spies, all that stuff. But the slow horses are kind of the rejects, the outcasts in MI5. They have a separate building. Everything's terrible. They're gross, like they're incompetent, all that sort of stuff. But it gets, right now they're like dealing with like the Russians right now. But it's a very interesting show. Gary Oldman is so good in the show. He is so disgusting. Like as a person, he's like ripping ass. He's eating ramen in a even though eating ramen can be pretty graphic in general, just the way he does it is like, what is going on with Gary Oldman right now? But he really makes the show great. But all the supporting cast as well has done a really fantastic job. And yeah, it's on. I think there's only 3 seasons of it right now on Apple TV, and so far, it hasn't jumped the shark yet. A lot of times with those like kind of spy sort of shows, I feel like it's hard to kind of just keep like one-upping yourself. They're always thinking of like, how can we make this more dramatic, or how can this be more intense? But so far, it really hasn't done that. Like pretty much every episode, we're just like, what the hell just happened? So yeah, great show. Recommended. Slow horses. Hopefully, the the series finale, whenever that's going to be, is going to be good. Otherwise, it might not be a recommendation, but for right now, it is.
Cool. I mean, Gary Oldman's a goat in a lot of ways. He's
and he knows Batman.
He knows Batman. I mean, that's all I got to hear. Thank you. Yeah, I'm glad that it wasn't actual slow horses, but that would have been hilarious too. You know, it's like I just live an underdog, you know. But so I'm gonna button up the show with kind of what we started talking about, you know, kind of the doldrums of January and like the winter time, and you know, just things sucking until like St. Patrick's Day, basically. Is a band that I love called Pine Grove. They are a New Jersey band, or they were a New Jersey band. I believe they're on hiatus, but they've been around since like 2015, 2016, and they are such a unique band. They are like this folksy emo band, just like matches the vibe of what this shitty weather like time of year feels like. And specifically, I've been re-listening to an album from a couple years ago called Marigold. That album, I think, is just their best. Although it might not have their best songs, but like all together, it has some of the greatest tracks, like all in one album, in my opinion. So if you were to listen to that one, I think that gives a good vibe of what the whole band is. And it kind of matches the vibe. It's like a little depressing, but sometimes you just got to sink into the depression to rise up out of it. That's how I've always experienced music and like television and movies in a lot of ways. So, you
know, it's great you bring that up too. And I'll definitely check this out, because like sometimes, you know, like I'll be listening to music or whatever, and Maria will just be like, "Why are you listening to this? It's so like depressing." I'm like, I just like it right now, you know, like it's just how I'm feeling right now. I'm not like depressed really. It's just like it's just fitting my vibe, you know. So I'm glad I'm not alone with that. But I love the album art too. I just kind of looked it up.
Oh yeah,
pretty cool. With, you know, got like the pixel vibe going with it. But yeah, I'll have to definitely check it out. Sounds good.
Yeah, some tracks from that album that I think are absolute bangers is Dotted Line, which is the first track. Spiral, Endless. Endless is the actual vibe of January, I will say. But Dotted Line, it opens up with that, like this little chirping guitar, and then like talking about crossing the border into New Jersey, and you're just like, I'm in. I do that all the time. So it's a banger. So thank you all for listening. It's been a great show. RIN, maybe not so great, but the show is great. I love talking about it. And you can continue to find me on Twitter at FreshBudsPod. I have another podcast called Fresh and Buds where I talk about flesh and blood. It is a lot of fun over there. And I mean, that's pretty much it for me. Yeah, find me over there.
Yeah, and if you want to check me out, outside the show, at Matty Gorm, Gorm, on all the socials. I've been most active probably on Twitter and Discord. I'm always on the Discord. Make sure you join the Fresh Juice Discord if you haven't. You know, I'm sure we haven't plugged it enough during the episode. But join the Fresh Juice Discord. I'm always hanging out in there. And yeah, it's another great show in the books, Tommy. And we've got February around the corner. The next episode is going to be, January's going to be over. Dude. So no more depression, you know.
Yeah, that's how it works, dude.
Yeah.
But thank you all for listening, and stay fresh, you juice heads.